Dear listeners, a new day and a new story to discuss. Today, I'm going to tell you a story that interests me. Listen and write down what you think about this situation. I'm interested in your opinions. Life's predictability is often a veil over its capricious nature. This truth hit me like a storm on a serene day just over a week ago. I remember the evening vividly. The sky was painted with hues of orange and purple as the sun dipped below the horizon. I was lounging on our worn-out couch, the one with the frayed edges and coffee stains, a testament to our modest living. The clock ticked monotonously, marking the passage of an ordinary day, until Laura walked in. The door creaked open, a sound I had grown accustomed to, but something was different this time. Laura stepped in, her usual vibrant stride replaced with a sluggish drag of her feet. Her face, often illuminated with a radiant smile, was clouded with an unspoken distress. I sat up, my attention shifting entirely to her. "Hey, Laura, everything okay?" I called out, my voice tinged with concern. She paused, her hand still on the doorknob, and forced a smile. "Yeah, Jeff, all's good. Just a tiring day at work," she replied, her voice lacking its usual cheer. I wasn't convinced. "You sure? You seem off." Laura sighed, dropping her purse on the table. "I'm fine, really. Just need a shower and some rest." As she walked past me, I noticed her shoulders slumped, carrying an invisible weight. The air around us felt heavier, charged with an unspoken tension. I knew Laura well enough to sense that something was troubling her deeply, something she wasn't ready to share yet. Dinner was a quiet affair that night. The clinking of cutlery against our plates filled the silence. Laura ate mechanically, her thoughts seemingly miles away. I wanted to reach out, to understand what was clouding her mind, but I also knew she needed space to process her thoughts. "Remember when I first brought you home to meet my folks?" I tried to steer the conversation to a lighter note, hoping to see a glimpse of her usual self. Laura chuckled softly, a brief respite from her somber mood. "How could I forget? Your mom's raised eyebrow and your dad's skeptical look." I laughed, recalling the memory. They thought I had lost my mind, bringing home someone so. I paused, searching for the right word. "Different?" Laura offered, a hint of a smile on her lips. "Exceptional," I corrected, reaching for her hand across the table. She squeezed my hand gently, her smile more genuine this time. "Thanks, Jeff. But let's be honest, I was a bit out of place. Your family and their fancy dinners, and there I was, a mechanic's daughter with no fancy etiquette. But you won them over, just like you did with me," I said, my eyes meeting hers. The conversation drifted into a comfortable silence as we finished our meal. I could tell Laura was lost in her thoughts again, her eyes distant. The urge to ask her what was wrong grew stronger, but I resisted, respecting her need to deal with things in her own time. After dinner, as Laura retreated to the bedroom, I remained in the living room, my mind racing with possibilities. The Laura I knew was an open book, her emotions always clear as day. But tonight, she was a mystery, a puzzle I couldn't solve. My thoughts were interrupted by the sound of a distant siren outside, a reminder that life's tranquility is often a facade, hiding its true chaotic nature. I decided to give her the space she needed, hoping that when she was ready, she'd let me into her world again. Little did I know, this was just the beginning of a series of events that would shake the very foundations of our life together. As I sat there, staring into the dying light of the day, I braced myself for whatever was to come, unaware of how profoundly it would change us. The chapter of our unlikely romance began on a sunny afternoon in the bustling campus cafe. I was there, buried in my textbooks, a young, confident college student with my life planned out. That was until Laura walked in, disrupting my world with her unassuming presence. She wore a simple dress, a stark contrast to the trendier outfits of other students, and her hair was tied back in a no-nonsense ponytail. I remember our first conversation. She was asking the barista for directions to the library, her voice laced with a nervous edge. I couldn't help but overhear and saw it as my opportunity. "Hey, I'm heading to the library myself. I can show you the way," I offered, packing up my books. Laura looked at me, a bit startled at first. "Oh, that would be great. Thanks. I'm Laura, by the way." "I'm Jeff," I said, extending my hand. As we walked, I learned she was visiting the campus, considering enrolling in some evening classes. Her honesty about her struggles with education struck a chord with me. She wasn't putting up a facade or trying to impress. Laura was just Laura, and that was refreshing. "I've always found school a bit challenging, especially reading and math," she admitted, her cheeks turning a shade of pink. "That's nothing to be ashamed of. We all have our strengths and weaknesses," I replied, genuinely impressed by her candor. We reached the library, and I showed her around, pointing out the quiet study areas and the resources available. She listened intently, her eyes wide with curiosity and a hint of awe. It was then I made a bold decision. How about I give you a little tour of the campus? There's a lot more to see, I suggested, hoping she'd agree. Laura's face lit up. I'd love that. Thank you, Jeff. As we walked through the campus, our conversation flowed effortlessly. She spoke about her family, her dreams, and her simple life back home. I found myself captivated, not just by her beauty, but by her perspective on life. It was unadulterated, real, and so different from what I was used to. I didn't take you for the type to be interested in a girl like me, she said suddenly, a playful smile on her lips. And what type is that? I asked, intrigued by her comment. The simple type. You seem like someone who'd go for the more. I don't know, sophisticated type? I laughed. Sophistication is overrated. I prefer authenticity, and you, Laura, are as authentic as they come. Our tour ended with a coffee at the same cafe where we first met. I boldly made a small bet with myself, 3 dates, and I'd have her swooning over me. Little did I know, it would be me doing most of the swooning. Our first official date was at a modest local diner. I remember her surprise when I told her to pick the place. You sure? It's nothing fancy, she warned. I'm not a fancy guy, despite what you might think, I said, smiling. The diner was cozy, with checkered tablecloths and the smell of fresh pie in the air. We sat in a booth by the window, watching the world go by as we talked about everything and nothing. Laura's laughter was infectious, and I found myself more drawn to her with every passing moment. As I walked her home that night, under the starlit sky, I realized something had shifted within me. This wasn't just another date or another girl. Laura was different. She was real, a breath of fresh air in my planned-out, predictable life. Thanks for a wonderful evening, Jeff, she said, standing at her doorstep. I should be thanking you. Tonight was different in the best possible way, I replied, not wanting the night to end. We stood there for a moment, the night air cool around us, neither of us wanting to say goodbye. Finally, with a gentle hug, we parted ways, but I knew this was just the beginning of something special, something unexpected. As I walked back to my dorm, I couldn't help but smile. Laura, with her simplicity and genuine nature, had unknowingly turned my world upside down. I was a young man with a plan, but she was the delightful curveball I never saw coming. And as I lay in bed that night, I realized that I was looking forward to seeing where this unlikely romance would lead us. Years passed since Laura and I first crossed paths on that college campus, each year weaving our lives closer together. Our bond, once fragile and uncertain, now stood resilient, weathered by time and enriched by shared experiences. One late summer evening, as we sat on our porch watching the sunset, Laura broke the comfortable silence. Can you believe it's been over 5 years since we got married? Her voice carried a tone of wonder, mixed with a hint of nostalgia. I leaned back, feeling the old, creaky wood of the porch chair beneath me. Time flies when you're with the right person, I replied, reaching for her hand. She squeezed my hand gently, a gesture so familiar yet always filled with love. Do you ever regret it? Marrying someone like me, I mean, she asked, her eyes searching mine for an honest answer. Regret? Never. Marrying you was the best decision I ever made, I said with conviction. You've made me a better man, Laura. She smiled, the kind that always reached her eyes, lighting up her entire face. And you've always been there for me, through everything. It was true. We had faced our fair share of challenges. Her father's illness a few years back had been a tough period. I recalled the night spent in the hospital, Laura's hand gripping mine, as we awaited news from the doctors. You were so strong then, Jeff. I don't know how I would have managed without you, she said, her voice laced with gratitude. I remember you saying once that family is everything. You showed me what that really means, I responded. Our conversation drifted to memories of the past, to the early days of our relationship, to our wedding, and to the births of our children. Each event had strengthened our bond. Each challenge faced together had deepened our connection. Our kids, now growing up fast, were a living testament to our love. Laura had been an incredible mother, nurturing and loving, yet always pushing them to be their best. How did we get so lucky with these kids? I mused, thinking of our 2 children, who were now inside the house, probably up to some mischief. Laura laughed, a sound I cherished. Good parenting, maybe. Or maybe we just got lucky. As the night drew in, and the stars began to pepper the sky, I thought about how our life together had unfolded. It wasn't always easy, but it was ours, and I wouldn't have had it any other way. You know, my parents weren't sure about you in the beginning, I said, a topic we rarely touched upon. Laura nodded. I know. I was the girl from the other side of the tracks, remember? But you won them over. Just like you did with everyone else, I said proudly. It wasn't about winning anyone over. It was about being myself and hoping that was enough, she replied, her words simple yet profound. That's always been more than enough, I assured her. We sat there for a while longer, lost in our thoughts, the night air cool against our skin. Our life together had been an unexpected journey, one that I had never planned for, but one that had brought me more happiness than I could have ever imagined. As we stood up to head inside, Laura stopped and looked at me. Jeff, no matter what the future holds, we'll face it together, right? Together, I confirmed, wrapping my arm around her. Always. As we walked back into the house, hand in hand, I knew that our bond, strengthened over time, was unbreakable. Life would undoubtedly throw more challenges our way, but together, there was nothing we couldn't face. Our life, once a calm river, began to resemble a turbulent sea. This transformation became evident one ordinary Thursday evening. The sun had just dipped below the horizon, casting a blend of orange and purple across the sky, a picturesque scene from our living room window. I was lounging on the sofa, a book in hand, when Laura walked in. That night, she was different, her usual calm demeanor replaced by a restless energy. Hey, Laura, how was your day? I asked, marking my page and setting the book aside. She hesitated at the door, a frown briefly crossing her face before she masked it with a smile. Oh, it was fine, just the usual, she replied, her voice lacking its usual warmth. Are you sure? You seem a bit tense, I pressed, concerned. Laura shrugged off her coat and sat beside me, forcing a smile. I'm okay, just a bit tired, I guess. But as the evening progressed, her behavior grew more peculiar. At dinner, she was unusually quiet, her eyes darting around the room as if lost in thought. I tried to engage her in conversation, but her responses were short, her mind clearly elsewhere. Laura, you've barely touched your food. What's going on? I finally asked, unable to shake the feeling that something was amiss. She looked up, her eyes meeting mine. I'm just not hungry, Jeff. Don't worry about it. But worry I did. That night, as we lay in bed, her restlessness was palpable. She tossed and turned, her every movement filled with a nervous energy that was so unlike her. Laura, talk to me. Whatever it is, we can figure it out together, I urged, reaching out to hold her hand. She turned to face me, her eyes glistening in the moonlight filtering through our bedroom window. Jeff, she began, then paused, her voice trailing off. What is it? Laura, you can tell me anything. She sighed, a deep, weary sigh. It's just, work has been really stressful lately. I don't know. I feel like I'm not doing enough. I squeezed her hand reassuringly. You're doing your best, and that's all anyone can ask for. Don't be so hard on yourself. We talked for a while longer, Laura expressing her fears and insecurities about work. I listened, offering words of comfort, trying to ease the burden she was carrying. But even as she fell asleep, her brow furrowed in worry, I knew there was something more, something she wasn't telling me. The following days only added to the mystery. Laura's behavior became increasingly erratic. She was either overly affectionate or distant and aloof. Her smile seemed forced, her laughter hollow. I watched helplessly as the woman I knew and loved seemed to slip away, replaced by a stranger with Laura's face. One evening, as we sat watching TV, I decided to confront the issue head-on. Laura, we need to talk. You've been acting really strange lately, and it's worrying me. She turned to look at me, her expression unreadable. Strange? How so? Like you're not yourself. One minute you're all over me, and the next, it's like you're a million miles away. What's going on? I asked, my voice filled with concern. Laura bit her lip, a sign I had come to recognize as her battling with her thoughts. I don't know, Jeff. I'm just confused, I guess. Confused about what? I pressed, desperate for answers. She looked away, her gaze fixed on some distant point. About us, about me, about everything. I feel like I'm losing myself, and I don't know how to stop it. Her words hit me like a physical blow. The foundation of our life together seemed to be cracking, and I had no idea how to fix it. I reached out, taking her hand in mine. Laura, whatever it is, we'll face it together. You're not alone in this. She nodded, a tear rolling down her cheek. I know, Jeff. I'm just scared. As we sat there, holding hands in the dim light of the TV, I realized that the change in Laura was more than just stress or fatigue. Something deeper was troubling her, something that threatened to tear apart the life we had built together. And as the clock ticked away the hours, I braced myself for what was to come, determined to stand by her, no matter what the future held. The air was tense in our house, thick with unspoken words and buried emotions. It was a chilly Tuesday evening when the veil of uncertainty finally lifted, revealing a twisted web of confusion and misunderstanding. Laura was sitting across from me at the dinner table, her eyes downcast, playing with her food. The silence was deafening, punctuated only by the occasional clink of silverware. I couldn't bear it any longer. "Laura, we need to talk. Whatever this is, it's eating away at us," I said, my voice steady but filled with concern. She looked up, her eyes meeting mine. "I know, Jeff. I don't even know where to start. Start from the beginning. Whatever it is, we'll work through it together," I encouraged. Taking a deep breath, Laura began, her words coming out in a rush. "It's about my job, Jeff. They offered me a promotion, a big one. But it means more responsibility, longer hours. That's great news, Laura. But why does it seem to bother you so much?" I asked, surprised yet confused. She shook her head, her expression pained. "It's not just the job. It's everything. I feel like I'm losing control, like I can't keep up." As she spoke, her voice trembled, revealing the depth of her turmoil. I reached across the table, taking her hand in mine. "We can figure this out, Laura. Maybe you need to take some time off, get your thoughts together." She nodded, a tear escaping her eye. "Maybe you're right. I feel so lost." We talked late into the night, discussing options, making plans. But even as we laid out a path forward, there was an undercurrent of something left unsaid, a secret lurking beneath the surface. The next day, Laura's sister Emily came over. Emily was always the cheerful one, the life of the party. But that day, she was different, somber, her usual bright smile replaced by a troubled frown. "Hey, Emily, what brings you here?" I greeted her as she walked in. "Jeff, I need to talk to you and Laura." "It's important," she said, her voice serious. We sat down in the living room, the three of us forming an uneasy triangle. Emily took a deep breath, then looked at Laura. "Laura, tell him. He needs to know." Laura's face drained of color. She looked at me, then at Emily, then back at me. "Jeff, there's something I haven't told you. Something I've been hiding." My heart raced, fear and confusion mingling in my chest. "What is it?" "Laura, you can tell me anything." She swallowed hard, then blurted out, "I'm pregnant, Jeff. We're going to have a baby." The words hit me like a ton of bricks. Joy, shock, disbelief, a whirlwind of emotions swirled within me. "A baby? We're having a baby." Laura nodded, tears streaming down her face. "I was scared, Jeff. Scared of how it would change everything. Scared of telling you." I reached out, pulling her into my arms. "This is incredible, Laura. Why would you be scared to tell me?" But as we embraced, Emily spoke up, her voice shaking. "That's not all, Jeff. There's more." We turned to look at her, and she continued, "Laura thinks. She thinks you're not happy with her, that you're having an affair." I recoiled, stunned. "What? An affair? Laura, you know that's not true." Laura looked away, her voice barely a whisper. "I know it sounds crazy, Jeff, but you've been so distant, so preoccupied. I thought maybe there was someone else." I shook my head, disbelief coursing through me. "There's no one else, Laura. There's never been anyone else. How could you even think that?" The room was heavy with emotion, the air thick with revelations and accusations. We sat there, the three of us, trying to untangle the web of fears, insecurities, and misunderstandings that had ensnared us. As the evening wore on, we talked, we cried, we confronted the demons that had haunted us. It was a night of confession and revelation, a night that laid bare the fragility and strength of our bond. But even as we began to mend the tears in the fabric of our relationship, I knew that this was just the beginning. The road ahead would be long and uncertain, but with a baby on the way and our love for each other as our guide, I believed we could face whatever lay ahead. Together. The air was thick with tension and unspoken thoughts as Laura, Emily, and I sat in our living room. The revelation of Laura's pregnancy had set off a cascade of emotions and misunderstandings that seemed to engulf us. It was a storm that we had to navigate together. "Laura, why didn't you tell me earlier about the baby?" I asked, my voice a mixture of joy and concern. She looked down, her fingers nervously twiddling. "I was afraid, Jeff. afraid of how it would change us, how you would react. I took her hand, ensuring my touch conveyed the love and reassurance I felt. Change is part of life, Laura. And this is a wonderful change. We're going to have a baby. She smiled weakly, a glimmer of relief in her eyes. I know. It's just, everything seemed so overwhelming. Emily, who had been quietly observing, chimed in. Laura's not the only one who's been overwhelmed. Jeff, she told me how distant you've been, how preoccupied with your work. It made her feel alone. I turned to Emily, a bit taken aback by her directness. I never meant to make Laura feel that way. My job has been demanding, but that's no excuse. Laura, I'm sorry if I've made you feel neglected. Laura squeezed my hand, a small smile appearing on her lips. It's not just your fault, Jeff. I should have spoken to you sooner, been more open about my feelings. As we continued to talk, the layers of our misunderstandings began to unravel. Each revelation, each confession, brought us closer to understanding and resolving the rift that had developed between us. Look, both of you, Emily interjected, what you need is to reconnect. Remember why you fell in love. Maybe take some time off, go somewhere together. Laura and I exchanged glances, considering the idea. That might be just what we need, I said, feeling a sense of hope. But what about the baby? Is it safe for Laura to travel? I asked, turning to Laura with concern. The doctor said I'm perfectly healthy. A trip would be fine, as long as it's not too strenuous, Laura replied, her voice growing stronger. The conversation shifted to where we could go, what we could do. Ideas bounced back and forth from quiet beach getaways to peaceful mountain retreats. The excitement in Laura's eyes was something I hadn't seen in a long time. It was as if the cloud of uncertainty had lifted, replaced by a spark of adventure and hope. We could go to the cabin by the lake. It's quiet, beautiful, and just what we need to get away from everything, I suggested. Laura's face lit up. I love that place. It's so serene, so us. Plans were made, bags were packed, and within a week, we were on our way to the cabin. The drive there was filled with laughter and talk of the future, of our baby, of us. It felt like we were rediscovering each other, peeling back the layers of doubt and fear that had built up over time. The cabin, nestled beside a crystal-clear lake, surrounded by towering trees, was a haven of peace. We spent our days talking, walking by the lake, and simply enjoying each other's company. It was a time of healing, of rekindling the love that had always been there, just buried under the weight of everyday life. One evening, as we sat by the fireplace, Laura turned to me. Jeff, I want to apologize for doubting you, for thinking you could ever betray me. I know now that my fears were unfounded. I took her hand, my heart full of love for this incredible woman who had been my partner through thick and thin. And I'm sorry for not being there when you needed me most. From now on, I promise to be more present, more involved. We're in this together, Laura, always. As the fire crackled in the background, we sat in comfortable silence, each lost in our thoughts. The challenges we had faced had tested us, but they had also brought us closer, made our bond stronger. We were more than just husband and wife. We were partners, friends, and soon-to-be parents. The resolution of our misunderstandings, the revelations that had come to light, had paved the way for a new chapter in our lives. A chapter filled with hope, love, and the anticipation of the new life we were about to bring into the world. As we looked ahead, I knew that whatever the future held, we would face it together, stronger and more united than ever before.